People often ask me, what are the types of alternative dispute resolution? Have you ever wondered what is the difference between mediation and arbitration? Or as you've ever wondered, what is the best alternative dispute resolution process? Well, then this video is for you. I'm Bob Bordone. I'm a senior fellow at Harvard Law School, and I've spent more than 20 years teaching alternative dispute resolution classes at Harvard Law School. Today, I'm going to tell you what alternative dispute resolution is, and I'll describe the various types of dispute resolution. And if you stick around to the end, I'll share some advice on how to decide which procedure is best for a given conflict. I'll also share with you what drew me to the alternative dispute resolution field as a career choice after I graduated from law school. But let's start with what is alternative dispute resolution anyway. Alternative dispute resolution, that is a mouthful. So we actually call it ADR in my field. ADR is any process or procedure used to resolve a dispute that does not involve litigation in a courtroom. Now, if you are like most normal people who are not lawyers, you are probably already a bit confused. You're thinking, aren't most conflicts resolved outside of a courtroom? After all, lots of times people negotiate, or they apologize, or they just lump it and move on, right? Shouldn't the use of a courtroom be the thing called alternative and not everything else? Well, you would certainly have a very good point. And in fact, I'm largely inclined to agree with you. However, the fact is that ADR is something that developed in the mid-1970s and 80s within the legal system. And at least for lawyer types, anything that isn't litigation is considered alternative. So in 1976, at something called the Pound Conference, the late Frank Sander delivered a talk called Varieties of Dispute Processing. And in this now famous talk, he suggested that there may be ways of resolving conflicts that use more consensual processes that would resolve disputes at lower cost with greater satisfaction than traditional litigation. Importantly, those processes would also allow greater autonomy of the disputants to craft their solutions. So this talk gave birth to the ADR movement. And we often think of three main types or processes of ADR: negotiation, mediation, and arbitration. So first, negotiation. Negotiation is any process where two parties come together to try to resolve a dispute by mutual agreement. As a negotiation professor, I'm frankly amazed at how few people have studied or ever been trained in negotiation, because this is an absolutely essential skill to all of life. And yet most of us are just winging it all the time. No preparation, no rehearsal, no training. Of course, if you're watching this channel, you've already discovered that there is a science and an art to negotiation. And so if you want to learn more about negotiation, definitely watch all the videos in the negotiation playlist on this channel. So after I describe what negotiation, mediation, and arbitration are, I'm going to then rank them and tell you which I think is best, medium, and least good. So second is mediation. So mediation is basically a process by which the parties try to resolve their dispute or conflict with the help of a neutral third party called a mediator. So a mediator is someone who is a neutral, meaning they're impartial. They have no interest in the outcome of the dispute. But they are facilitating resolution by establishing a really good process, by listening to the parties, and by asking good questions. Now, there are many, many types of mediations, and there are many, many types of mediators. Some mediations are connected to court in some way, but much more frequently, a mediation occurs more informally. Maybe it's through a human resources office, or maybe an ombuds office. But mediations also occur in schools and classrooms and in families. In terms of mediator styles, they also really run a very wide gamut, from a mediator who might be highly evaluative and directive to a mediator who might simply help facilitate an agreement of the parties, but really allowing the parties to reach and design a resolution on their own. If you want to learn more about mediation, I want to encourage you to watch the videos that I've posted on the mediation playlist on this channel. The last of the three processes is called arbitration. So arbitration is a process by which two parties in a dispute submit that dispute to an impartial and neutral third party, and then the third party actually renders a decision on the merits. So if you're wondering, well, that kind of sounds like litigation, what's the difference between arbitration and litigation? That's a great question. So one way of thinking about arbitration is that it's private litigation. In arbitration, an arbitrator or arbitrators are paid for their work, whereas in litigation, the issue goes to a court that is paid for by the government. Also, while parties in an arbitration will submit written documents supporting their cause, typically an arbitration can still be a bit faster and a bit cheaper than litigation. Of course, in some cases, there's a panel of 3 arbitrators who hear a case, and in other cases, it's just a single arbitrator. Finally, while negotiation, mediation, and arbitration are the 3 main types of ADR processes, truth of the matter is, there's emerged a bunch of what are called hybrid processes that often meld different features of each of these 3 processes. For example, there's a process called meet-arb. In a meet-arb process, the parties first try to mediate the agreement using a third-party mediator, but if they can't mediate it, then they agree to submit their dispute to an arbitrator who will make the decision. And in some cases, the person who serves as the mediator is the same person who will serve as the arbitrator. And in other cases, the person who serves as the mediator is actually different from the person who will be the arbitrator. So, you might be thinking, oh my gosh, this is totally confusing. If I'm involved in a conflict, how do I decide? Should I negotiate? Should I mediate? Should I arbitrate? Well, let's consider a few things. First is the cost. Negotiation definitely wins on this score because it is the cheapest and the easiest process. You don't need to hire anyone. And if the parties communicate well, having them communicate face-to-face has lots of advantages. Mediation usually comes in second on cost. First, that's because sometimes there are volunteer mediators. Now, even a volunteer mediation is more costly than a negotiation because you're taking up more individuals' resources. And of course, in some cases, you actually have to hire a mediator. But hiring a mediator tends to still be cheaper than hiring an arbitrator or a panel of 3 arbitrators. Of course, when we're evaluating these processes, we're not just focusing on costs. We also should be looking at the question of how much you control the outcome. But here again, negotiation wins the day. And that's because in a negotiation, the parties have 100% autonomy over what kind of an outcome they'll arrive at. Mediation comes in a close second, and that's because even though a mediator might help craft the outcome, mediators can't force the outcome, and so the parties still retain control over what the outcome is. The worst of these 3 processes is an arbitration, and that's because in an arbitration, the arbitrator or panel of arbitrators is going to make a decision, meaning the parties have no control of the outcome once they submit it to the arbitrators. Third consideration you want to think about is what role does creativity have in this process? And again, we're going to rank them in the same way. Number 1, negotiation. Number 2, mediation. Number 3, arbitration. Third is the role of creativity. And once again, the processes line up the same. Negotiation supports the most creativity, then mediation. Obviously, arbitration is low because a decision is just imposed on you. Okay, so you might be thinking, wow, negotiation and mediation are clearly the big winners here, and you would be right. However, there are some instances that might counsel against using either negotiation or mediation. So sometimes when negotiation and mediation might not be as advisable are when there are really big power differences between the parties, if there had been a history of past abuse, if coercion is involved. In those cases, looking to something more like litigation or arbitration might be smarter. So you might be thinking, gosh, Bob, what made you want a career in ADR? Well, first thing, it felt to me like there was a real opportunity here to help people come up with resolutions that were so much better than what litigation or even arbitration could do. Second, I love the idea of creativity at its core. And third, this idea, especially in negotiation and mediation, of consensual dispute resolution felt really consistent with my own values of listening and healing and trying to do work to help people build bridges. So if you're considering pursuing an ADR as a career, I couldn't be happier for you. It's deeply fulfilling, it's challenging, it's a healing career that demands lots of creativity and stamina and learning. So, to keep learning more, stick around for this next video on what happens if you don't agree in a mediation. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the button. I'm Bob Bordone. Thanks for joining. Let's keep negotiating. If you don't agree in a mediation, literally, this is the key.